You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for hitting that play button. This is another episode of the Dave Bullis Podcast. Really quickly, before we get to today's show, I just want to say two quick things. One is, because it's so popular, we're going to do it again. I am going to give away another free one-year pass to Masterclass. If you're interested in being in the competition, it's going to last for about a week. It's going to be it's going to start now from when this is up to December the 8th of this year, 2017. And all you have to do is go to iTunes and leave a review. Hopefully it's a 5-star review. And I would really, really appreciate it. And if it was a 5-star review, but just leave a review on iTunes. And if you could send me the link and the screenshot of the review, either one or both if you want, and I'll enter you into the competition. It'd be awesome to get to 100 reviews before the end of this contest. So again, that ends December the 8th of this year, which is 2017. Again, I'm giving away a bunch of free stuff. If you go to the pre-show notes at davebullis.com and look up this episode, which is 193, there's a ton of free stuff, and I'm always adding to this as well. Anything I can do to sort of put all this free stuff in one easy-to-find place is what I'm trying to do. So, again, it's at davebullis.com. You can find all this stuff, including, my TV pilot, which I'm sure you're also going to be talking about. But Game Over is also there if you want to watch that for free. I'm getting really, really into YouTube as well. So I hope to put a bunch of more stuff up there sooner than later. But I just want to get into today's episode because this is a really cool episode. And, I've entered screenwriting competitions, and I've gotten feedback, and, and sometimes you think the feedback's right, and sometimes you're like, well, this is way off the mark, And when I had the opportunity to interview my next guest, who is the head of the Page International Screenwriting Awards, she's the founder and executive director, I, of course, jumped on the opportunity because I have so many questions I wanted to ask her about just screenwriting competitions in general, the myths you hear, all that stuff, and that's why I wanted to bring on this guest. And my next guest, and we'll just get right onto the show here. My next guest began her career as an assistant and script reader at Davis Entertainment, and she's also a Producers Guild member. She's a Directors Guild member. And she's been running this competition now for about 14 years now. And a record high 6,364 scripts were submitted last year. And the competition for Page actually begins this year on December 1st, 2017 for the 2008 competition. We're going to talk about a bunch of stuff, other screenwriting competitions, all these myths, all this really good stuff. This is a fun episode, especially for all you screenwriters out there. This is purely about screenwriting. This is episode 193 with guest Kristin Overn.
You're listening to the Dave Bullis Podcast.
Okay, many moons ago, I was a student at Northwestern University studying theater, and I focused very much on directing and playwriting, and I loved that side of the entertainment industry. But I stayed in Chicago for a couple of years, but then very shortly discovered not only how difficult it is to make a living doing theater, but I was repeatedly encouraged by many friends of mine who had moved out to the West Coast to come out to Los Angeles. And one guy in particular was telling me that I'd make a great, what they call a D-girl back then. That was the early 90s. And D-girl was a development girl. A lot of women were working, reading scripts, doing script evaluation at the time, and advancing through the ranks in that way. And I was fascinated by that. I love story. I love storytelling. So, and I love the weather out here. It was cold and snowy in Chicago. So I finally made the move, and I started out as an assistant, like so many people do. I worked in television on a show called Chicago Hope, and I also worked at a place called Davis Entertainment, which John Davis's company made some major movies and television at the time as well, and did development for some other companies. slowly kind of worked my way up, but then took a little detour. I ended up being invited to co-produce a feature film, a little independent movie, $1 million feature that a buddy of mine was producing and directing, and he wanted me to work with him. He needed somebody on his side who he could trust and who he felt could help make the movie happen. So I jumped on board, and suddenly I was working in production, in film production, and it was, education by trial by fire, but it was a great experience. And so then I started working more and more in production and learning more and more about that. And I produced theater, but film, of course, has its own quirks and problems and issues. And it was a fabulous education, and I did that for several years. But all the while that I was working in production, doing budgets and hiring crews and working on these low-budget features, my real passion has always been storytelling, developing scripts, editing, working with writers. And I discovered a real need because one of the things I learned as I was working with all these little independent movies is that there were and still are many up-and-coming new producers and junior agents and new managers, people who are honestly looking for new writers who have a hard time connecting with them because the new writers don't know to pitch them. They don't know how to get to them because they don't even know, in many cases, that they exist. But these are the people who are truly open to working with new writers because they're also new and they're looking for that fresh voice. And I conceived of the idea of the Page Awards as a contest, using a contest as a means to be like a development department. When I was at Davis Entertainment, John had money and they had a big staff and they had a lot of people reading scripts and evaluating them, moving them up the ranks to the point where they would eventually, hopefully, finally get to his desk. So I thought we could use a contest the exact same way. And so that's when I founded the Page Awards. It was back in the fall of 2003. And we've been going hot and heavy ever since. It's been growing and building, and it's actually worked beautifully in the way I hoped, which is that it's connected a lot of new writers with new up-and-coming managers who are looking for new clients and producers looking for new scripts.
You mentioned, Kristin, about new writers finding producers, and producers sometimes don't know where to look, or maybe new screenwriters don't know how to pitch them. And in today's marketplace, with where we have all these different websites and not meaning like social media, and you have all these different contests and stuff like that. Do you think that it's easier now or it's harder now for that connection to happen, simply because there's so many producers and there's so many writers, and producers are getting hit by so many different directions? Is it harder for talent to sort of stand out?
That's a really good point. In some ways it can be. It may be easier for you as the writer to find people who are looking for new material online. However, as you said, they're getting a barrage of material and it's not vetted. And the thing that a contest will do, for example, like ours, is vet the material for the producer. And the reason we have a lot of these people reading the final round of our contest, they'll say, I want to read your top 10 thrillers or your top 10 TV dramas or whatever it is. And they know that by the time these scripts have advanced to the top 10, to the final round, they've been vetted by 4, 5, 6, 8 other people. And so they know that the material is really strong. So that's the extra sauce that we add to the process at this point.
Yeah, I always hear about all the different avenues that people could use to. And I know I'm kind of getting away from screenwriting, but just use as an example, all of the different avenues that people could use to distribute their film. Going onto YouTube or Vimeo, etc. And as I've talked to different guests on here, that's something that we've always come back to is how do you get the attention of buyers? How do you get the attention of certain people that you're looking for? How do you get the attention of your target market? And I remember there was an interview with Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez, and they were kind of talking somewhat similar about that. And Tarantino was very adamant in the fact that the best quality material, whether it be a screenplay or a movie or a piece of music, will always rise to the top and will sort of get above the noise, so to speak.
Absolutely, I believe that. And so the more people that you have reading it and kind of giving it a stamp of approval, if you will, the more people in the industry can sort of trust that, yeah, other people like this. So, I can take a look. And there is, there's a certain amount of what everyone else likes, I should like as well. Hollywood is a funny place in that regard. Opinions, sometimes people aren't always as sure of their own opinions as they are of other people's opinions, if that makes sense. And so that's when you hear about situations like if one manager wants to sign you, suddenly 3 others are chomping at the bit as well because they feel like they don't want to miss out on something good. It's competitive, and it can work to your benefit. It can work against you sometimes, but it's just the nature of the beast, I think.
Yeah, very, very, very true. And, I know we're kind of, as we're talking about distribution, I'm kind of getting ahead here, but I wanted to sort of ask too about getting started in your career, because you've produced a lot of things. You've produced a lot of films. You've worked as a unit production manager, and you worked as a location manager. You worked as a line producer. And I wanted to ask, has this experience when you started out and as you have gone through your career, how has this experience sort of helped you out your current position at Page? I mean, have you sort of? Well, I'm sorry. I shouldn't add to that question, Kristin. So I'll just keep it at that. How did this all this experience help you with Page as you are the executive director now?
No, it's a great question because it does. I mean, a lot of people, I think, sit in offices reading a lot of scripts, and that's great. That's one thing. But when you've actually been in the trenches on the set, sat there figuring out budgets, seen what actually happens on the set with certain issues in the script that began day one when the script, was presented, you learn a lot about what works and what doesn't in production. And it is helpful in terms of evaluating material. That said, I will tell you, I mean, the projects I did were all small. They were low budget projects. And a lot of the scripts that win the contest in the action adventure category or historical film are big budget movies. So in that sense, it's like, I don't know that the writer should think of limitations always. Especially depending on the type of movie you're writing, don't be limited if you have a vision for a huge, big movie. I mean, if that's what it wants to be, that's what it wants to be. But if you are trying to write a film that a new producer can do for $1 million, there are budgetary constraints. There are certain things you can't usually afford tons of a cast of thousands, huge numbers of extras. CGI is becoming more and more affordable, so that's less and less of a constraint than it used to be. And there are people who can do it very inexpensively, but still, there are a lot of things you want to keep in mind if you're trying to write something low budget.
Well, yeah, I think that's a good point, Kristin. And I wanted to sort of follow up that question. If somebody did have a script, whether it be a short screenplay or a feature-length screenplay, and they said they wanted to make it themselves, and since you have the producing experience and the screenwriting experience, have you had friends or clients or people you just met who have you ever had anybody who's had a lot of luck? I don't want to say luck. I want to say success. Thank you. I was trying to find that word. Have you had anyone who has had a lot of success doing something like that? Because the reason I ask is that also I've seen more and more where somebody, like we were just discussing, is somebody wants to produce their film, somebody wants to produce their screenplay. Well, hey, I'm not going to I don't want anyone to have to say yes or give me the green light. I'm going to give myself the green light and go out and do it. So I wanted to ask Kristin, have you had any people that have any success in doing this?
Absolutely. Many of our winners actually have gone ahead and done that. They had that in mind all along for their project, and they wrote it for themselves to direct, and they have, in fact, done so. A lot of short films, obviously. We've had a few people who have been maybe grad students at UCLA, USC, wherever, and perhaps the script they sent us was their graduate thesis or just a project that they wanted to produce coming out of school, and they're very aware of, what it's going to take and how much it's going to cost. And usually they're putting up the money or their family's putting up the money or whatever. So, and they've been very successful shorts. We also had a couple of scripts that won the contest that have been produced by features by the writers themselves and directed by the writers themselves. And one that I can think of right now is landed distribution, and I think will be coming out on Netflix and a couple of other places. It's been around the festival circuit. One of our winners, Lori Welts, wrote a script called Scout. It was produced by another producer, but she directed it, and that has had a really nice distribution in the festivals. And it was on Netflix a few weeks ago. I saw it on Netflix, and so and that's really exciting. We encourage it. We're so excited by writers who are willing, able to do that, because that's it's such a huge learning process, and B, it's taking your career into your own hands. And that's wonderful when you can do that.
Yeah, very, very true. And just to continue with that question, Kristin, just as we talk about producing films right now, I wanted to ask if we took it the opposite way, which is meaning that somebody did something that they aimed way too high, and but for the resources that they had, and honestly, I'm guilty of that as well. I've done that before, where I tried to make this action shoot 'em up short film, and you realize you don't have the crew for it, you don't have the CGI people for it, you don't have the time to set up all these gunplay scenes and stuff like that. So have you seen that too, Kristin, where you've had people who just they said, hey, Kristin, can I show you my movie, and it's just you could tell they fell short.
Yeah, I mean, well, of course, every once in a while you see a short film or a project that somebody's attempted to shoot and they just ran out of money at some point. And that's always too bad when that happens. But again, it's a big learning experience, and we all go through our learning experiences, whatever they are, and hopefully come through it and continue despite whatever problems you might have had with your first project.
Yeah, and see, that's what happened to me. Just speaking from my own personal experience, is what happened was I aimed too high. I made a student short film, and I got very, very comfortable with making what I mean. You make a student film, and then suddenly you're like, oh, okay, I got this. I made a very simple student short film. I can now make a John Woo type movie. Why not, right? So then all of a sudden you're falling short, and I think we learn a lot more from our failures and our successes, because as the saying goes, sometimes with successes you sometimes people get lucky. They really do, as I've learned in life. Sometimes you get lucky and you have the right crew in front of you. Sometimes you get lucky and you find the money. Sometimes you get lucky and the location pops up. But with failures, you realize, oh, wait a minute, this isn't my time to make this film. And I'll give you another example too, Kristin, is I had a friend who was making a time travel movie, and she wanted to make it where, I think it was like the 1800s, I think, or the 1700s. And I was explaining to her, you're going to have to buy all these, or I'm sorry, not buy, but rent all these time period clothes. You're going to have to worry about cars and everything like that. You're going to have to worry about planes. And I said, how are you going to pull this off? And she was gung-ho about it. And when we saw the final project, she said, oh, now I see what you were talking about. And she admitted too, because, you can spend a couple grand on colonial era clothes
Absolutely.
in a flash of, what I mean, in a blink of an eye. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, okay, that's just, a handful of clothes. And, and what else are you going to spend the rest of you don't have any money to spend the rest of, to buy anything else for the movie. So that's another learning experience. So that's just what I mean by falling short. It's, you learn a lot from your failures, and sometimes we learn more from our failures than our successes.
Absolutely true. God knows that's true for me. And I have to say, she had the opportunity to learn from your failures, which is even better, because I always say I'd rather learn from someone else's failures. So I listen very closely to other people. And she made the mistake perhaps of not listening to you in that case, but she learned the lesson anyway, and she had to go through it. And I'm sure she got a lot out of it despite whatever happened, because that's what life is all about at the end of the day.
Yeah. And trust me, if there's one thing I know, it's how to fail. So it's how to fail often, but you sort of, as you meet at different people, you learn that almost everyone has made some kind of mistake like that, where they try to do way too much too early as they started making their films. I've learned that from just doing this podcast. They make a simple film to begin, or they maybe they got they were in the right place at the right time, and they got an amazing crew or what have you, and the second film and the third film were like, wait, what happened here? You're taking steps backwards. So
it's something, the sophomore curse or something like that. I don't know, but yeah, it's that happens a lot. We have that in the contest as well. I've seen situations where writers, somewhat rare, but it happens. Because of their just basic writing talent, somehow what they piece together almost by intuition, accident, whatever, is just really works. But then they try to write that second and third and fourth script, and somehow it kind of all dissipates. And you wonder, well, then they have to go back and learn the lessons that and solidify the understanding of why the first script worked, and how they can replicate it, although I hate the word replicate, but replicate the elements of that worked, So it's fascinating.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. If somebody writes, a script, the first one, let's call it the freshman script, and
Right.
and they hit it out of the park. It's a home run. It's everyone loves it. That people want to read it, and the second and third script aren't there. I mean, is it usually because maybe they were trying a different method? Is it maybe because they just tried to just rush things out too quickly? I mean, is that some of the things that you've seen?
I honestly have to say, I have no idea why it doesn't work the second time or the third time. I have no idea what it is that sparked the first one that just somehow didn't work in the second and third and fourth. It can be probably any one of the things you mentioned, but we have a situation recently. I don't think the writer would mind because I think he's talked about it himself. He won the Page Awards in 2007 with his very first screenplay, and he's been working on it ever since. And his subsequent efforts haven't quite worked as well. And he says himself he's just had to go through a huge relearning process to really understand what it is that makes a screenplay work, even though intuitively he did something wonderful the first time out of the gate. And now this year he won another prize with us. He's kept getting notes. He's kept reading. He's gone to conferences. He's just really continued to work and stuck with it. And at the end of the day, that's brought him back to maybe where he began, but now with that basis of really solid understanding of the process, the writing process, what it is, a better understanding of screenplays as a craft,
Yeah, and that's interesting too, because you mentioned he wrote his first screenplay, and that's what he ended up winning with in 2007. So does that happen a lot in your experience?
No, it doesn't. Most of the time, to be honest, people's first screenplays can be kind of a train wreck. I mean, sometimes they just haven't bothered to really study the form at all. Sometimes writers think they know how to format a script better than the people who do it every day, or they think they don't have to know anything about structure or what. I don't know what it is, but they think they've seen a lot. I guess what it is, they think they've seen a lot of bad movies, and so their movie is bound to be better than all these bad movies they've seen. But most of the time, people's first efforts are not, they don't reveal their full potential. It's only after, most people will tell you, it takes many scripts before you really achieve something wonderful and special and something that's going to get you signed or something that's going to get produced. But there are exceptions. Every once in a while that you run across somebody whose very first script is just somehow magic. I don't know what to tell you. There's a little mystery to the whole thing, which is what makes it fun.
It reminds me of what Shane Black once said. He was doing this Q&A session, and somebody asked him a question, and he said all the time he gets a lot of he'll get an email or he'll get a note sent to him via his agent from like a fan or a filmmaker or what have you, and it's always, hey Shane, I saw this movie in a Blockbuster, in a Netflix or whatever, and I could write better than that. So I decided to write, and then Shane usually goes back with, well, I'm glad that you think your mediocrity is better than some other mediocrity that you saw. And he said his advice is instead of, using that as saying, oh, I could write better than this, how the hell is that a movie? He's like, you should really just want to do it in general, regardless of, if you think you could write better than some other movie that's out there.
Exactly. It's got to be, at the end of the day, it's got to be a passion that you're willing to stick with. And that's, again, why I admire this writer who stuck with it all these years, even though his second and third and fourth efforts were not as successful as his first. I mean, his first script did not end up selling, but it got a lot of good attention. And it's still a viable movie from my point of view. So, but it takes that kind of dedication and passion. And if you've got it, stick with it. Keep at it and study and read and talk with other writers and be part of a writer's group. And don't be afraid to get notes. A lot of beginning writers are really afraid of getting feedback on their scripts because honestly, they're afraid of what the person reading their script is going to say, and they don't want to hear it, deep down. It's like you don't want to hear that you have cancer or something. It's you don't want the bad news. But the truth is, that's what's going to help you grow. Again, it's your mistakes that learning from your mistakes that is going to get you to the next level as a screenwriter.
That is 100% true. I actually used to run a screenwriting group, and we would have people who would want to join. Every so often somebody would come in and say, hey, I have a friend, or I have somebody else who wants to join. And this one time somebody came in, he was a first-time screenwriter, and he actually had illustrations within his screenplay. I was a little nicer about it. I was like, hey, I wrote a little note on there. Hey, don't put in, illustrations of a design in a screenplay. Like, you're not at like a James Cameron level where he could just do whatever he wants and no one's going to bat an eye. If you're using this as a calling card or what have you, it has to follow certain guidelines. Whereas other people just put in the script, they were like, no, an exclamation point and stuff like, you know what I mean? It's just, it is very hard, especially when, you put all this effort and time into a screenplay and you get feedback and, people tell you, hey, you know what, it just isn't good, or some people will say, hey, look, it just sucks. And I think that what happens is Kristin, I think we kind of view it as an extension of ourselves. So we think, hey, look, this screenplay sucks, therefore I suck.
Exactly. It's your baby. And I know that, for example, the folks who read for us, the judges who read for us and write notes, and we talk to them about this a lot. It's critical that they understand that each script is a writer's baby, and they believe in it and love it. And our job is to help them make it better and advance as writers. And I think our judges really try to do that. But I have also heard a lot about writing groups where things can get pretty brutal. Sometimes other writers can be, your toughest critics. I don't know. It can be really great to be part of a writer's group. I've heard some horror stories too. So it's all about putting together the right group of people that are going to, grow together as a group.
Yes, very, very, very true. And about if everybody is really a part of the same goal, which is to be a professional writer, a working writer. And, I was a part of another group where every month, we met once a month. And every month we would have a whole new batch of people show up. So we would have to explain like the beginning of screenwriting. Hey, this is what formatting is. Hey, go by final draft. Hey, make sure that you're all set. You know what I mean? Like it's all these things. And finally, we started, me and the guy who ran it at that point in time, we said, wait a minute here, we're kind of like spinning our wheels in the mud because every meeting we're just briefing these new people, and then they leave, and then we're getting a whole nother group, and then we're explaining it to them. So it's like, somebody once told me that the best way to run a writer's group is to gain entry. You have to submit a screenplay, a feature-length screenplay, and every member sort of, takes it and gives their feedback, and then you take a vote on it. But that's the key, is they have to have written at least one screenplay.
That's very smart. Yeah. I think that's a great idea. Or if it's a group of people, none of whom have written a screenplay, that's fine too, but then you're on the same level and you're learning together, But the commitment is the other part. It sounds brutal to be losing people all the time and bringing in new people all the time. That would be really hard.
Yeah, what I think it was because the reason we had that constant flux of people leaving and coming was because of the time did change every month, and also I think that a lot of people weren't really ready for like, oh, this is a real writers group. And you know what I mean? Because like everybody, like the about the 3 or 4 people who were, I would say, were at this sort of like, I guess, top of the group. If you know, there. I mean, we all. I mean, it was myself and 3 other guys, and we all are doing stuff now. You know, I in the business one way or another. But the thing is, like everybody else, I think was more along the lines of they wanted to start like a beginners group. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I you know, because it's kind of like, you know, if you went to go play a sport or something, you know, you want to start on a team with other people that are, you know, you're like, you know, around like your skill level. You don't want to start and all of a sudden you're playing with people who are veterans playing for years. You know what I mean? It's just kind of, you get a little intimidated, if you will.
Absolutely. And it needs to be mutually beneficial for everybody involved, you know, so it's best if you're all kind of on roughly the same level, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not saying like I'm some expert either, Kristin. I'm not.
No.
You know, so, I'm just saying, you know what I mean? It's just like sometimes, you know, in this business, sometimes, you know, things can get intimidating, period. You know, you see a film in a film festival you're a part of, and you're like, oh, well, God damn it, that person's better than me. I'm not. Yeah. I have no shot of winning. So, you know, and it's, I think it's happened to everybody. Sure.
And it's understandable that people get intimidated, you know, because it's hard. And, you know, you're vulnerable because it's your baby. And that's what makes it great, though. That, you know, when you have that kind of passion for your project, and you care that much, it's both a curse and a blessing, because, you know, it's what is ultimately going to make your writing special and that project special. It's also what's going to make you vulnerable to taking notes personally, or, you know, driving people away because you're too difficult to deal with, or whatever the situation is. So, you know, there you go. It's just part and parcel of the business.
Yeah, very, very true. And I wanted to ask too, Kristin, as we sort of get into this about Paige in general, you know, as we were talking in the pre-interview, there was an impetus for you to start Paige. And I wanted to ask, you know, what was that point in time in your life where you decided to actually start the competition?
It was a time when I was doing a lot of producing. I was working as a line producer. I was doing a lot of budgets for people, reading a lot of scripts. And I really realized that I just missed the writing aspect, working with writers and evaluating scripts and helping writers develop scripts and all of that. That was more my passion than all of the work I was doing on movies to get movies made. That's a grueling life, and I have friends who are great at it and who love it. But you're working 20-hour days for weeks at a time, and then suddenly the project is over. You got to have another gig right away and move on to the next. And it's a tough life, and it wasn't the kind of creative life that I wanted. So I wanted to get back into working with writers and reading scripts and working with people who evaluate scripts, which is what all our judges are, and also being a little bit of a matchmaker. I have to tell you, I love the opportunity to take our winners and introduce them to certain judges. Sometimes I have a hit that a certain judge is really going to love a certain script, and maybe if they even read a different category, it's like, yeah, I know you read the comedies, but I think you're really going to love this family film. And so I slip it to them in the process, and sometimes that works out, and it's really exciting when that happens.
So when you actually started Paige, you know, what was some of the responses that, you know, you first got? I mean, you know, again, like when you start anything, like we were just discussing, you know, it's very nerve-wracking. You get very nervous, you know, because there's always that feeling, you know, what if I fail? You know, so what were you feeling when you first started Paige?
Well, yeah, you're nervous that it's not going to work, of course. Luckily, because we did something unique with Paige at the time, which has since become pretty common, which is that we split the contest into these different genre categories. Initially, we had 9. Now we have 10. And we have the judges evaluate scripts only in the genre that they're most interested in reading. Sometimes people like reading several, but we have them focus on one. And so basically, they're kind of comparing apples to apples, if you will. Of course, not every drama is like every other drama, but at least you're not comparing a drama to a sci-fi film or whatever. So, you know, that that has been a real help on every level, both in terms of the judging process. The writers love being able to submit in a certain genre, knowing that their script is really going to be read by people who love that particular type of script. And that way we can also present awards in the different categories and send out promotions. And so if people are looking for our top 10 sci-fi scripts or whatever, we can send them those. It's ended up working out really well over time. And sort of when you talk about the beginnings of the contest, that was one of the key things that I saw working right away and I felt was really important. And so that's kind of kept me going through the first couple of years, even though, of course, the first couple of years we got about 1,000 entries, which was pretty good. But it was tough to make ends meet. We were still operating at a loss, but I could see that this could really work, and people were starting to find projects that they liked, and that kept me going, in the beginning, because I felt like, yeah, this idea is good. This idea will work. We just have to get the word out, and it has to become better known.
So just to go now to like sort of flash forward to today, 2017. How many submissions do you get a year now?
We got about 6,300 both the past couple of years. So we're almost peaked out. I think the Nickel receives just over 7,000. Lately, the past couple of years, I think Austin has received something like 9,000 submissions, which is massive. Our judges, the way we structure things, we would have a hard time handling too much more than we get right now. So we're in a good place. I feel some people say that you have to read about 100, even 200 scripts to find a great one. Well, if we get about 6,000 entries and we give 31 prizes, that's about right then, I figure.
When you get 6,000, 7,000 entries, I could just imagine, that there's that just all these screenplays sitting in a room and it's like, my God, where do you even start? How is the process? I've always been interested, even with the Nicole and the Austin Film Festival one, and some of these other screenplay competitions, that are getting high 4 digits submissions. How do you start to sort through them as they come in?
Well, it's well systematized now, and luckily because everything's online, things are doable that would not have been doable 10, 12 years ago. So as the scripts come in, they come in a certain category. We have certain judges reading certain categories, and they get assigned to them online, and everyone's reading everything online now. So it makes it relatively easy. But we do have over 90 judges over the course of the 5 rounds of competition. So it's a lot of people going through it. But it's all handled through a little online system that works pretty well. Pretty well.
So just to sort of continue with that same question, do you ever get so much digital traffic then, and you're and you start to sort of lose track of things, or again with all the submissions, I could just imagine with again high 4-digit submissions, it's like, how do you keep track of everything, And I imagine so do you have a whole team behind the scenes, sort of okay, this is an action adventure, this is a comedy, this is a horror?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's all online too. It's all recorded when the script comes in, so that the scripts can be automatically tracked to the right judges. And Zoe and Jennifer are very hands-on, our team behind the scenes. And Zoe handles all the submissions, and she does a fabulous job. And she's very much on top of it, watching as things come in and making sure that they're tracking to the right judges. And when writers request feedback, she'll be careful she actually assigns those individually. So she makes sure that it's a script that particular judge has not read before. It's the type of script that she thinks they'll like based on the log line, that kind of thing. So we're very hands-on, but by the same token, we've got it pretty well systematized now so that things keep moving, which it has to do. When you, as you say, when you have 6,000 entries and you have basically from January through October is the whole process, but the vast majority of them are read by the middle of July. It's a lot of scripts to read and a lot of people reading.
Yeah, and I mean, having to get and all the feedback and stuff like that. I've had friends who even started their own screenwriting competitions on a much smaller scale, obviously. And even then, it was just like, my God, what the hell have we gotten ourselves into? And
that's very true. I think a lot of people think, oh, let's start a screenwriting competition. We'll make some money. It'll be easy. We're looking for in some cases, it's like we're looking for a script. Let's start a contest. But it's actually, if you're honest about it, and if you do it with integrity, it's a lot of work, and it takes a lot of kind of caring people behind the scenes, the administrative team and the judges to make it work well. Otherwise, it ends up being pretty much a ripoff for the writers, and I've seen and heard a lot of horror stories in that regard. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, because I've entered screenwriting competitions before, and I haven't entered Page yet, but I'm actually hoping to get something done in time to enter. I
hope we'll live up to your expectations. But yeah, I mean, your own experience, I'm sure, would be really educational for your listeners, because what's the range of experience you've had with contests?
Well, I think Paige already meets my expectations, because, like, honestly, because I mean, I've heard of the competition before, as I was, obviously when we were just discussing this whole conversation, I'm familiar with Paige, Austin, the Nickel, but in my experience, by the way, the ones I just mentioned, I've not entered before. I entered one. And I got back maybe half a page or a page of correspond, of like feedback, and that's what I really wanted, was that feedback. Because I wanted to hear what the reader was the reader was going to say, and basically at the end, she admitted that this screenplay wasn't for her, and just kind of let me down easily, because she just didn't know where it fit, so to speak, and I forget what language she used, but I felt like, okay, I don't really know if this was worth the extra money to pay for the feedback, but what I did was, and this is a part of the funny story, was I took this screenplay and I knew a producer, and he said, hey, if it's a horror comedy, and I sent it to him. And he goes, Dave, this is so over the top. He goes, I don't know how to even market this thing, blah, et cetera, et cetera. Well, a couple months later, I ended up bumping into him again. And he goes, you know what? I should have went with you on that screenplay. He goes, I don't know what the hell I was thinking about. He goes, I've been thinking about that opening. He goes, and the funny parts were funny. The horror parts were scary. He goes, I just don't know. He goes, I just don't know how to actually market it. And I said, it would be tricky. It would be very tricky, but it could be done. And so I told him that the feedback I got from the screenwriting competition, and he said, yeah. He said, we talked about what competition it was, and he said, yeah, they oftentimes either don't give any feedback, or they just sort of give like this very homogenized feedback.
Yeah. I mean, feedback can. What can I say? We work really hard to give our writers great feedback. That's a very important part of our mission, because, it helps writers grow. And that's what our goal is. We love it when writers enter a few years in a row and they keep doing better and better, and they've got more and more scripts and a stronger body of material. And so that finally, when they do win, they end up getting signed because they have a body of material to show a agent or manager, and things are launched from there. That's actually kind of an ideal scenario, and we love to be a part of that. We love to help writers do that, and feedback is a huge part of it. I think getting professional feedback is so helpful for writers when you can get it from someplace that's supportive, that's where the goal is to help you improve as a writer, rather than just trash you or tell you why the script doesn't work. So, but there's the whole range out there. It's writers, I think as much as you can get, my bottom line advice would be get as much as you can and take it all with a big grain of salt, because that's really, at the end of the day, when you're working as a professional writer, you're getting notes all the time on everything. You do 8 sets of rewrites on a script by the time it gets into production, or more. I mean, it's crazy how much, and you have to be able to take all these opinions from the producers initially, and the financiers, and then the director and the actors, and somehow incorporate that into your script and keep the integrity of your script, and make sure it continues to work, because often the notes you get aren't even if the person offers a solution, often it's not the right solution, but maybe they have their finger on the pulse of something that's problematic. So you have to, as the writer, interpret that and make the note work within your vision of the script. It's very complicated and hard to do. So the more practice you get at taking notes, even if they're bad notes, and just figuring out, what was this person really saying? And, is it something I want to do? Is it something that I want to incorporate in the script? Or, and when you start hearing a note from more than one person, really pay attention, because something's not working,
Yeah, I concur, and one other thing I wanted to say too was that sometimes that note could be that something's not working, and one thing I've noticed too is also something could be working, because I wrote a screenplay years ago, and I remember the one positive I got out of it was that there was one note I always got. It was like, oh, this is actually working pretty well. This is a really nice way to open this movie. And only one person out of everyone I let read it said, oh no, that's over dramatic. Don't do it that way. And everybody else disagreed. And I was like, all right, I think I'm going to go with that. Just going to keep it in there.
The majority, and that's again, you make my point for me, which is get as many opinions as you can. And ideally professional opinions, but your friends is fine. As long as they know something about reading a screenplay. If your writers group is great, but get as many opinions as you can and get as many professional opinions as you can from wherever, because the more you hear, the more things will start to make sense. And then that one oddball opinion will stand out as like, oh, no, that was just that person who had a bad dinner that night or whatever, but, or just didn't understand something about this, whatever the situation might be. But if you just get notes from one person and you take those as gospel, you could potentially be led astray.
Yeah, very true, Kristin, very true. Kristin, I know that the Page Screenwriting Awards opens this year, which is December 1st, 2017, which is in about 2 weeks, give or take, and probably about a week from when this podcast actually is going up. But I just wanted to, ask, just while I have you on here, because I've always heard this about screenwriting competitions. I heard that the better the chance to sort of win or to even just to get noticed is to get your screenplay in earlier. And the reason they say this is because they say, judges and everybody has to read so many screenplays that they end up, pulling their favorites out first. You know what I mean? Like they'll have that in their mind. They have like, oh man, I remember reading this script and and it really stood out. And then versus handing it in later, and you have less of a chance to sort of stand out. You know what I mean? Like we were talking about earlier on, where the top always goes, the cream always rises to the top. So is there any truth to that in your experience?
No.
Okay.
No. So, that's one of the myths. And, I do think the judges have less to read early on, and they're fresher, if you like, in a sense. Although most of these people, keep in mind, are reading for their companies all the time anyway. So this is just something they incorporate into their schedule over time. But here's the thing. Like for us, we have 5 different rounds of competition. So your first round judge will read your script pretty much soon after it comes in, right? And then we also have the second round that starts right about in March, once there's enough buildup of stuff moving forward from the first round. So those people start reading in March, and they read through the middle of the summer. But once you get to the third round and fourth round, they're kind of reading things all at the same time and not necessarily in order that it was submitted. So basically, what we have found, and I've tracked this because people have asked this question a lot. We've had scripts with the 31 prizes we give. Usually, one of them will have been submitted on the very first day of the contest, and 1 or 2 of them will have been submitted on the last day, and they pretty much are scattered all throughout. So it really, that is not. It saves you money to enter early. We push you to enter early because we want to get scripts in for the judges to read. We want to give them enough time to read everything. We don't want everything coming in May, at which point, we wouldn't be able to get everything read in time to make our announcements. So that's why we give, all kinds of incentives to enter as early as possible. But it does not affect your chances of winning.
That's another sort of false myth out there put down. I'm glad I asked that question because you see all these false myths online about screenwriting in general, And I'm just glad that they
Yeah,
really put that.
no, that I think at least in our experience, that's one of them. I mean, maybe other contests. I can only speak for us, but that's the way things run here. And I honestly have seen a lot of the scripts that are submitted in the last couple of rounds of competition win, as well as some that are submitted early on. So it's pretty well spread out throughout.
And, Kristin, we've been talking for about, 50 minutes now. And I just wanted to ask, is there anything that we can get a chance to talk about that maybe you wanted to discuss right now, or just even anything you want to say to sort of put a period at the end of this whole conversation?
I think the only thing is, people ask me a lot, what does it take to make a winning script? What is it that puts the winners over the top? And it's a very, very hard question to answer. And I've tried to sort of distill it down over the years. But I would say that for us, the scripts that advance up to the semifinal and final round, they're all really strong. They're strong writers. They're interesting ideas. The scripts have a lot of strengths. But every script has certain, what somebody would call a weakness. If one judge read it, they might say, oh, I love this character. Derivative to me. So everyone, opinions differ in that regard. But at the end of the day, what I hear over and over when we're down to the final decisions is people saying, this script, the thing that's so special about it is this is a character that I know 10 actors who would love to play this role. It's so compelling, and so the story moved me, and it will move an actor. So the script has a real shot of getting made. And the voice of the writer is just so clear and so specific and so special that they feel like they've read something that is unique and will stand out from the crowd. So whatever its other flaws might potentially be in terms of that they can work on in development, which, as I said, it'll end up probably going through however many rewrites in the course of development and into production. But the true thing that's there, the core of an idea that's really special, a role for an actor that's really unique and compelling, and something that's really going to make an actor sit up and take notice, and just something in the voice of the writing that makes it stand out from the crowd, whatever that is.
Yeah, and that's very true too, because whatever gets you to stand out from the crowd, and you've seen examples, all throughout, even in the like the 90s, for example, when Shane Black wrote Lethal Weapon, Quentin Tarantino, you could really tell when he really enjoys writing his scripts, because they just sort of pop their own style of popping out at you. And then even some of the screenplay competitions, the award winners, like they just released the screenplay for Mudbound. They released a couple of the other screenplays that how the you can when you read them, you can kind of see how they did what they did with their screenplays. What causes them to be unique.
Absolutely. When Juno came out, that was such a special script and movie because she had such a strong voice. On the same sort of note, but the flip side of it is that please do not try to copy Quentin Tarantino or David Mamet or somebody else who has a really strong voice, because really the judges roll their eyes at that. Industry readers roll their eyes at that. They've seen a lot of copycat scripts. It's really about finding your own vision, your own voice, your own approach to the world and to your story that is unexpected and fresh. And that's where you hear the phrase familiar but fresh. It's like an idea that perhaps people in the industry can understand and say, oh yeah, I know we know about some movies like that, but this particular script has such a fresh twist on the idea. And that's the writer's voice, the writer's point of view that makes it stand out.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, by the way, Kristin, about not trying to copy anybody else. I once had a friend of mine who started before me in the film business, and he started before me, and he ended up calling himself the next Quentin Tarantino, and he kept labeling himself as that. And finally, I think he bumped into a manager or agent, and they said, why are you marketing yourself as the next Quentin Tarantino? They were like, do you think Quentin Tarantino went around and said he was the next whatever? They're like, he just wanted to be Quentin Tarantino. That was it. Like, you should be focused on that, not trying to be somebody else. And I think Oh, I'm sorry.
Absolutely. I'm just agreeing with you
Yeah.
wholeheartedly because it's so important. You have no idea. I mean, I can't tell you how many times they do, it's another Guy Ritchie script, or something. They're just, and people do it so, you have no idea how many other writers are trying to copy some of these iconic writers, and it just doesn't work. So find your voice, find your own voice. Oh, but one good exercise, if writers want to play with it, and this is a fun thing to do, is write a script in the style of, just for fun, as you're learning, maybe a short film even, just as you're learning, as you're growing, just to kind of strengthen your chops. Write a script in the style of Quentin Tarantino or Diablo Cody or whoever, it just to see how different writers might approach a different subject, a different basic storyline. That's a really fun thing to do. And it teaches you a lot doing something like that.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and I've seen, but I do like the idea too. Is just to be unique and be yourself, because at the end of the day, you have to be yourself, right, Kristin?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I think that's a great sort of sign off. It's like be yourself.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask in closing though, is where can people find you at online?
Pageawards.com is our website. And we opened for entries this year on December 1st. It's our 15th anniversary. Yay. So we're very excited. And our judges are getting warmed up and ready to read all these wonderful new screenplays that are going to come in. And
the Page Awards, Page International Screenplay Awards opens December the 1st, 2017. I will link to everything that Kristin and I talked about in the show notes. Everyone at DaveBullis.com. Twitter, it's at Dave_Bullis. Twitter, it's at DB Podcast. Kristin, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Dave.
Oh, my pleasure, Kristin. And I am going to enter this year. I want you to hold me to that. And so
I will. I'm going to email you if I don't see a script coming in from you. It'll be like, hey, where is it? Where is it? We're looking for it.
Yeah, please do. Please hold me accountable. But no, all kidding aside, I do want to enter this year. I actually want to really start getting out there and entering more contests. And Pages was on my radar even before this podcast interview. I swear, it was Scout's honor. I'm not just saying that.
I believe you.
All right, Kristin, again, I want to say thanks again. And you know what? I look forward to seeing what you're going to do next. And I wish you the best of luck.
You as well. Take care.
Find Dave at davebullis.com. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast.